Hey all, Flame here, and welcome to the FlameHisWorld commentary of Mega Man Xtreme for the Game Boy Color. Now this one is another little handheld spin-off adaptation kind of game that I have a bit of a soft spot for. It's become like one of the little weird subgenres I cover quite a lot of on this channel actually. I've done the Game Boy Mega Man games, I've done the Game Gear version of Rise Star, and a few other bits and pieces that I recall too. But where this differs from the previous Game Boy Mega Man games that I've done is where they were covering classic Mega Man, this game covers the Mega Man X series. They're to get the little punning with Xtreme, which I absolutely approve of, and you can see X on the screen here, so, you know, it is adapting Mega Man X and X2, which X1 on the Super Nintendo I'll say is one of my favourite games of all time, and X2 is okay, so it's got some competition that it's trying to live up to, I guess. That's one of the things that does sort of work against it, the fact that it is a scaled down version of a 16-bit game rather than being a scaled down version of an 8-bit game, so it's got that working against it. And there are some more minor issues and a major issue that I'll get into when we get into the game properly. But first up, we have this very long cutscene. This cutscene goes on for 5 fucking minutes. And that is the biggest problem with this game's narrative. It's not the narrative itself, it's just how it's presented to you. Because they're trying the best they can with the Game Boy Color. They're trying to show off both an image to accompany the story and the story itself. But they can only sort of fit in about 5 or 6 words at maximum on the screen at once. So when they've got this long script that they're trying to work through and just communicate what's going on to you, they really have to take their sweet time with it. Thankfully you can just skip the cutscene if you're coming back to the game after a while or whatever. But this is a Let's Play, so I'm going to show it off. I want to show off the story, I want to show off all the cutscenes and whatnot, so I'm going to have to just bullshit while this plays out. So the general gist of the story is that there's this computer in the Hunter base that's been compromised. There's been a bit of a hacking going on there, and it's spreading fake news and there's some shit going down. It's basically a bit of a clusterfuck. In fact, I've got this summary here from the Mega Man knowledge base that I'm going to read out because I feel this paragraph here is a much more direct way of telling the story than this whacking great cutscene they got us watching. So, it's the year 21XX, where humans and Reploids coexist. Peace returned to the world thanks to the efforts of the Maverick Hunters. But one day, the mother computer of Hunter Base, the Maverick Hunters headquarters, has been hacked by an unknown source. All of its data was overwritten in an instant, and the resulting fake data has sent the whole world spiralling into chaos. Command Center sends X out to face the as yet unidentified enemy, who has resurrected Maverick data from the past. So, as you can probably imagine, the Maverick data from the past is their little excuse plot on why we're refighting the same Mavericks that we fought in X1 and X2. It is very much a direct adaptation of the Mavericks and Maverick levels from the console game, akin to, say, Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge 2, 3 and 4 on the Game Boy. More so than, say, Mega Man 5 on the Game Boy, where they made a load of original stuff, which I get it, you know, it's like the complimentary handheld version of the game, but at the same time I did also enjoy the new stuff they brought into Mega Man 5, so I could kind of go either way with which one I prefer. I know that when I did those games originally on the channel, I kind of ended up being a lot more positive toward 5, although I did like the other games on the whole as well, so it's like, you know, if you're gonna do a handheld adaptation, like, if it is an adaptation, because Mega Man 5, like, it's called Mega Man 5 Game Boy, but it's not really an adaptation, all things considered, if you think about it. It is just a original game with the same name as another game for some reason. Which was a little bit bizarre, but this game actually came out quite a bit later than the console versions. This game came out on the Game Boy Color in Japan in 2000, and in the US and Europe in 2001. So compared to the Super Nintendo games which came out in the 90s, they waited a little while. Like, I believe, off the top of my head, I think X1 and X2 were around like between 91 and 93, but that's that. What I'm doing here is something that is a very important factor to consider when you play this game, and that is the controls. The controls are honestly my biggest point of contention with this game, because X's gameplay, I don't feel there's a convenient way to play it on actual hardware. So what I've done for the sake of playing the game here is I set the option where the dash is assigned to start, as opposed to the default, which is to hold down and press A, which is really fiddly in practice. But even then, if you imagine on a Game Boy Color screen, that would have been really fiddly. You'd have had to do like even more of a claw hand thing than you have to do with the default Super Nintendo control layout. You would have had to sort of stretch your thumb over awkwardly. I'm glad I didn't try that, but like, for what I did here as my little workaround is I picked that option in game to use start, and then I went into the emulator settings and rebound the start button from the Game Boy Color to the right bumper button on my PS4 controller, and that turns this game from a bit of a clusterfuck to play into a genuinely fun game. Like, with the way I have it set here, it plays very similarly to the Super Nintendo games. If you're trying to play this on actual hardware, I just wouldn't recommend that. And that is a point of contention that I feel I need to talk about off the bat, because I really don't like having that kind of setup. You know, where it's like there's an official way to play the game, but you're better off using a workaround. It's something that I've never been that fond of, because it's like the way they offer the game to you isn't the best way to play it, and that's a really bizarre recommendation to have to make, to fuck around and make your own control scheme, because the default one and the other option they give you are a bit shit. But I suppose they're working with the Game Boy Color, so I can't rag on them too much. It's just X's gameplay being based around the dash quite heavily. There's not really much you can do about that when there's just two face buttons, at least over on the right hand side. So they're trying their best with the tools they had, but it's a bit of a mess. I know this game has been released on the 3DS though, and I believe the 3DS emulator you can tweak the buttons with, so if you're playing on the 3DS you might want to look into that. Like, I know at least the Wii U emulator you can. If you buy a digital download like virtual console game on the Wii U, I know you can just like go into the settings and tweak what button does what. But yeah, that is the one thing that I wanted to get out the way at the start here, because depending on the control setup you have, how you're trying to play this, and essentially what hardware you're using, that I feel is the make or break on whether you will enjoy the gameplay in this or not. The other thing that, while I was talking about that, I did miss over is the first stage is just a direct take on the highway level from Mega Man X. But there were a couple of changes with the boss fight, and that is one that Vile, due to what I can only assume is a translation error, he's been left with his original name of Vava, which sounds a little bit off. Like, in English it just doesn't sound right really. He's Vile. And the other thing is that he can actually kill you here. Like, it's not like the original game where it was a scripted thing and you had to lose. No, in this game you do need to beat him, but to allow that to happen, in this game you can jump over him, which is a godsend, because in the original game he was really fucking tall, and if it wasn't a scripted section that would have really fucked you over. This new character here is Middy, I can only assume that his name is going back to the classic series naming convention of being a musical reference, because it sounds like a little nod to the Middy sound format, and also there's another character we'll meet later called Techno, so maybe they're taking it away from rock and roll in the original series, and this is just where they bring in a bit of the electronic stuff. I will say, when you're looking at the character designs on screen right now, you've got X and Zero that have quite a defined art style between them, and actually have really good sprites considering this is an 8-bit game trying to adapt 16-bit character designs. But Middy looks like a classic character. He looks like a character from classic Mega Man. Like, he would not be out of place in Dr. Light's lab. That's the kind of look that he has going on, and I don't know whether that's something they would have thought about and done intentionally, like if they want to have that throwback, or what I feel is more likely because there's fewer colours available in this game, this sort of looks like a screen crunched NES game. So it's probably more likely a case of, like, we're trying to make a character design that we won't have to oversimplify once we try and crush it down. Because, to give credit to the artists for games like this, it is very difficult to take a character who originated in a 16-bit game and had a lot of extra details in their sprites in their original games, and to try and strip away some of that detail. Like, to do that and still have the character look good is a lot of work. Takes quite some talent to do that. So the fact that they decided to keep the original characters in this game a bit more simple, I can respect that. That's probably a very good idea, all things considered. They managed to make X and Zero look good, and Vile looked pretty good in his sprite as well, but I guess it's just working with the tools they have. You know, they have these established characters, but they don't want to make their job harder for themselves if they don't have to, which I can fully understand. I'm wondering what the hell Middy's trying to type there. I'm seeing his animation and he's just sort of bopping his hands around in the same place, and it's like, is he one of these people who just goes online and he emotes through mashing the keys on his keyboard? Because some people do that and I don't really understand it. Here we have the general nerd talk, which whenever you got a story that involves characters going into a computer and there's a tech expert character, you're gonna have some stuff like that. I get it. Ladies and gentlemen, join me next time where I'll be making a start on the Mavericks in this game. See you then.